Okay, I'm going to be the the news reporter here. I actually was a journalism major, so I should do this and see how good of a voice I can do. But I have a news story to tell you, and this is about the first death of the new millennium. Although the millennium didn't technically start until 2001, people reveled in the New Year celebrations when it became 2000. Now, if people are trying to remember the first baby born in the new year, then this should most definitely make the record books. In Nevada, a 26-year-old man, his first name was Todd, he became the first person to die celebrating the millennium. Minutes before midnight, this Stanford graduate climbed to the top of a street light in front of the Paris Las Vegas Hotel in Vegas. Now, at midnight, he started to slip. But in an effort to break his fall, Todd grabbed the streetlight electric wires for support. He didn't survive the electrifying millennium festivities he was conducting, but the camera that was there actually caught his 1999 climb and year 2000 headfirst plunge to the concrete below. Reports couldn't be obtained to find out if he died from the electrocution or from the 30-foot fall, but he did make the first noteworthy news story for the year 2000. Thank you. And I need to take a break from having to do these things. Thank you very much. And I apologize for not being able to breathe so well and having the hardest time here. And I've been telling stories about, well, we'll have one more about New Year's. Okay. So one morning, after leaving New Orleans on New Year's Day, ready to head back to Chicago, she said that we should stop at a Denny's for breakfast. And I get it. Remembering being a goth drama kid, hanging out at Denny's at all hours of the night because you were too young to drink at a bar. But I don't go to Denny's because, well, one year, after partying in New York for New Year's in D.C., Paul, one of my buddies there, said he wanted to go to a diner in Delaware for breakfast. Now, we hadn't had anything to eat, and we'd been drinking forever for New Year's, so we thought this was a great idea, and off we went. Now, as I said, we hadn't eaten, and we were starving once we were in Maryland, so when we saw exits for Annapolis, we thought that this would be a good place to grab breakfast. We walked into an empty Denny's, which didn't even have locks on their doors because they were always open. And they sat us in a booth and they took our order. The waitress brought Paul's Grand Slam and whatever I ordered. I don't know, an omelet, hash browns. But just after we started eating, a really big man entered Denny's, and even though the Denny's was empty, they sat him right behind me in the booth right next to us. He was built like Chief Wiggum, and he shook my seat as he worked his way in. I thought of that Simpsons episode where Wiggums was in a booth at a diner and Lou had a stab at Wiggums' seat with a switchblade, popping it like a balloon so Wiggums could get out of his booth. So when he sat in his seat, he moved my booth seat like 6 inches toward the table, and then he immediately lit up this huge cigar that smelled like burning manure. Now, how would I know what burning manure smells like? Well, look, I worked on a farm. I lived on one for a bit, and when I tried to eat, all I smelled was that burning manure. So not 2 minutes after Wiggum sat down, I started hearing noises, and my seat started moving. A minute into these gurgling noises, which sounded more and more like heaves, I suddenly heard what sounded like wet concrete splattering against cement. This man right behind me was shaking and threw up for over 1 minute. Now, instead of burning manure, all I could smell was his alcohol and bile. And so I said to Paul, right then and there, "We're leaving and not paying for our food." Still eating, Paul said, What? Why? So after I tyrannically whispered about the smells and the sounds of the fat man's vomiting escapades, the nonplussed Paul finally relented and followed me to leave. I gave the waitress a tip, but the people at Denny's understood why we wouldn't pay. So yeah, we did go to that diner in Delaware, and the food was good, and no one vomited. And you know, for a minute there I even thought about getting biscuits and gravy. But that New Year's, I resolved to never eat at a Denny's again. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. The true story is the weirdest one. Thank you very much. Oh, and I was just talking about being in D.C. for New Year's. One of my times I went to D.C., I was taking a friend there to see the town because this 5'6" woman was about to go into surgery to remove a cyst from one of her ovaries, the size of a softball. Well, a friend was driving us to O'Hare Airport, but before we got on the road, I picked up one of those small Domino's pizzas, and as we started driving along the Kennedy, we agreed that the best bite of any slice of pizza was always that center point bite. And so we agreed right then and there to eat the center bites of all of the triangles of pizza before we actually went on to eat the rest of the pizza before our flight. Yeah, and you know, another time I was flying to New Orleans on a business trip with another coworker. She was scheduled to fly with me. And now this coworker was cute as a button girl from Kentucky, and she was a riot to hang out with. And she was deathly afraid of flying. And I knew her fear, so I brought, back before 9/11, when you could bring water or soda into an airport without any problem, I brought a 32-ounce plastic cup from a fast food joint, and it was filled with hot chocolate and peppermint schnapps. And she said she was afraid, so I told her to enjoy some drink before we got on the plane. And she ordered beers on the plane, and as I knew we were landing, I started telling her jokes and keeping her totally enthralled until I finally said, well, we've landed already, and we've made it, and everything is okay. I'm used to flying in airplanes for big events, even if the event is actually flying an airplane right before New Year's in Southwest Florida. Getting trained, photographing the view from the clouds before taking over the controls. Or going up in a plane in Longmont, Colorado with no side door and a parachute strapped to my back. And someone tells you, okay, we're up 12,500 feet now. It's time to start moving. And you waddle to the open door, hold on to the fast-moving airplane for a second for dear life, and then let go. I've flown for family. I've flown to marry people in a wedding. I've flown for vacations. Flown for my mother's cremation. It's amazing. Sometimes the trip can be a story, but wait for that flight to land, because that's when the real story can start. Now I'm going to have to come up with stories once I land. Oh.